I would like to uh, welcome you all. My name is Ali Behdad. I'm, as Luke mentioned, the director of the center. It's been a wonderful opportunity to work with such a stellar group of scholars. It's really been one of the best privileges. I've chaired departments, but nothing has been as exciting as the center, because it's a place, as I will mention in a few seconds, colleagues do great work without asking anything in return, which is very different from chairing. Yes, I would like to welcome you all to this scholarly workshop on Islamic manuscript. I also wanted to welcome all the speakers, especially our out-of-town guests, Dr. Evan Kropf, who is a librarian of the Middle East Studies and the curator of Islamic manuscript collection at the University of Michigan, which also happens to be my alma mater. So I spent many years there and know the library really well, at least. So welcome and thank you for coming. I also would like to thank Luke, who really single-handedly almost with, of course, with the help of our other colleague, Asma, came up with this idea, but Luke has been behind this great work and organizing this workshop. And it's just wonderful to see your wonderful energy and vision in creating such a great, successful program. I have no doubt that will provide you, all of you, with hands-on introduction to Islamic manuscript and manuscript culture. And thanks again to our staff. For those of you who are not familiar with the Center for Near Eastern Studies at UCLA, CNES is a research hub where over 100 faculty, I think around 110 faculty from humanities, social sciences, arts, and the law school collaborate in a variety of research and pedagogical projects. It was founded in 1957 and is one of the oldest and most distinguished US centers for interdisciplinary research on the Middle East broadly construed. We provide a forum for exchange of ideas and dissemination of information within and beyond campus. And our faculty offer cutting-edge research and fresh perspective on the challenges and cultural richness of the Middle East. The center also supports graduate and undergraduate instruction in over a dozen academic departments. We provide FLAS grants and other grants, research by faculty, students, and visiting scholars, and interchange or exchange among scholars from around the world. And of course, vital public programming on the challenges that faces the Middle East and North Africa, as well as many cultural and social achievements. As you know, this is a particularly important moment for this kind of work, and we're very grateful to our faculty and our students who engage in this kind of research. We're also proud of the fact that, as I said, we have our public programs attracts people of the MENA heritage living in Los Angeles metropolitan area and broader audiences with an interest in the Middle East. Most of our programs are actually are available on our website in case you miss anything. We have several lecture series all available online for you to check out if you miss it. So please check our website, and all our events, of course, are free to the public, and I really would like to invite you all to attend them. Today's workshop is aimed at the first step in what we hope, at least many of us in the center, we hope, will be a series of workshops to make the extensive holding of Islamic manuscripts at the Special Collection of UCLA's Charles Young Research Library more accessible to scholars and students. A great deal of these manuscripts, from what I understand from my colleagues, are not cataloged and are therefore not accessible to scholars, to young scholars who are going to be working on that. So in the next couple of days, our distinguished visitor, Dr. Kropf, and our other speakers that Luke mentions will lead these workshops, the sessions that will be devoted to such topics as parchment and paper, bindings and structures, quires and codices, scripts and hand paleography, and historical and paratextual elements. We hope that in providing this training and this workshop as a first step, some of you in the audience, many of the graduate students, young faces that I see here, will actually help us gain a better understanding of this rich collection of Islamic manuscripts at UCLA by way of making this important archive easily accessible to scholars and students of Islamic studies. And we will have research funding available for those of you who will be working on it. In fact, we are working on several grants, hopefully one major one that to be able to support all the graduate students and scholars who will be working on. So please check our website. There are a lot of funding available. So thank you all for coming, and I wish you all a very productive and enriching experience in the next couple of days. I actually am looking very forward to this panel this morning myself, as I hear there's a lot of manuscripts on Qajar era on which I'm working on. So now I would like to invite our, my dear colleague Luke Yarbrough, who will introduce the manuscripts and our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Behdad. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the goals of this workshop over the next few days. And I'm also going to give an overview of the manuscript collections here at UCLA. So our primary purpose this week, of course, is to gain a better understanding of Islamic manuscripts and the literate cultures and larger cultures that produced and consumed them. To this end, we have a rich offering of sessions in store for you over the next few days. But the workshop has other purposes as well, none nefarious, I assure you, but some broader and also more immediate. We hope that it will help to build a network of interested scholars here in California and beyond, and equip them to value Islamic manuscript sources and use these sources in their work. In particular, we hope to catalyze conversations about using manuscripts in education and outreach to undergraduate students, graduate students, and the broader public, both to enrich our own educational offerings and also to encourage the conservation, preservation of those collections. Indeed, at the center of this workshop is UCLA's own significant collection of Arabic script manuscripts from the Islamic world, which I will refer to as Islamic for the sake of convenience in the rest of this talk. We hope that this workshop will raise awareness of UCLA's collections, increase their use, and support efforts to document and preserve these collections. So, what do the Islamic manuscripts in UCLA Library's special collections comprise? First, a disclaimer. I should say that I myself am a relative newcomer to these collections. In this, my first year teaching here at UCLA, I have unfortunately not had the opportunity to immerse myself for months in the reading room and to gain extensive firsthand knowledge of the collection. So most of what I'm about to tell you is therefore secondhand information. And even secondhand information about some of these collections is scanty and scattered. And there seem to be few local scholars, at least who I've had the pleasure of running across, who have extensive experience using them in their full breadth. When speaking of these collections, it is sometimes said that they amount to the second largest assembly of Islamic manuscripts in North America, after that of Princeton University. And I have no reason to doubt that this is the case. It is in any case a very considerable collection, or rather set of collections, since the collections consisting mostly of Islamic material are by no means integrated into a single undifferentiated mass, as you'll see very shortly. Here is some basic information about the collections. From what I can tell, there are 15 main Islamic collections, of which the Minassian collection is by some distance the largest and best documented. Let me briefly treat the others before focusing on the Minassian in slightly greater depth. And these numbers, by the way, after each of the collections refer to their official number in the Online Archive of California, or the OAC, which I will introduce to you in a few minutes. So as you'll see, they vary widely in their size, content, and state of preservation. So first, we have the Garamani collection of Persian and Arabic manuscripts and books, 3 boxes, 19 manuscripts, really real variety of things, quite a number of historical works. You can see the other topics here, which include a 19th century Persian biography of Napoleon Bonaparte, which apparently is an original work, and that is open for use. which is by no means the case for all of these collections. Second, the Sami Ain Tabi collection of Arabic manuscripts, 20 boxes, about 210 manuscripts, religious sciences, literary prose and poetry, entirely in Arabic, and that is only partly processed and cataloged, and as a consequence, you cannot be guaranteed access to it. Third, the imaginatively titled Collection of Arabic Manuscripts, 170 boxes, 85 linear feet, who knows what's in it. Fourth, collection of Turkish manuscripts, 204 boxes, 350 manuscripts, roughly, that's my own estimate. Apparently largely Turkish folk poetry, but also religious sciences, copied throughout the Ottoman period, and that is open for research. Fifth, 450 manuscripts in the equally descriptively titled Collection of Islamic Manuscripts, and these are chiefly in Turkish and Persian, but the only real inventory of them that you're going to find is in the catalog by Muhammad Taqi Danish-Paju, which I will tell you about in a few minutes. Number 6, the Tekes collection of Ottoman, Persian, and Arabic manuscripts, which is comprised of about 750 manuscripts, again inventoried only in Danish-Paju. In other words, you're not going to find a finding aid in Roman script on the internet, unlike is the case for some of the others. Number 7, the Egyptian manuscript in Arabic, 36 boxes. Again, I've seen a couple of these boxes, but we really don't know what's in them or really how many manuscripts this would be. You know, I would guess maybe a few hundred. The Qayani collection of Arabic and Persian manuscripts, about 50 of them, and they are inventoried in a fairly detailed way in the finding aid. Those are open for research. Then the crown jewel of the Islamic collections, the Minassian collection of Near Eastern manuscripts, 174 boxes, about 4,700 manuscripts, which alone would make it the second largest collection in the Americas, even if none of the others existed. 10th, the Wellcome collection of Near Eastern manuscripts, 32 boxes, about 250 of them. I believe these are chiefly in sciences and medicine, but there is obviously some other content as well. 11th, the Ruhollah Karoubian collection of Arabic and Persian manuscripts, definitely one of the smaller ones, but as a consequence, one of the better documented. Chiefly Shi'i theology, jurisprudence, and devotional materials from Qajar, Iran, but also some assorted things like personal notebook and for some reason a Syriac manuscript. We're getting toward the end, I promise you. The Ilmiya collection of Arabic and Persian manuscripts, 5 boxes, 43 manuscripts in the usual kind of religious and exact sciences. This is interesting, the Sheikhia collection of Arabic and Persian manuscripts, 5 boxes, 43 manuscripts. And this seems to come almost entirely from the Sheikhia movement in early 19th century Iran, which, although I'm far from an expert, I understand as a movement within Shi'i thought that later, some of whose members later joined the Babi and Baha'i movements. But there are some sort of autograph works from the movement's founder, whose name was El-Ahsa'i, and other interesting things. Then the exhibit collection of Near Eastern manuscripts, which is kind of an odd bird. It seems to have been sort of compiled by pulling the pretty manuscripts from some of the other collections and calling it the exhibit collection. I don't know how that works from a cataloging, documenting perspective, but in any case, if you want to see the pretty ones, this is the one to concentrate on. And some of these, a few images of some of these are available through the UCLA library site. Finally, the Rudolf Gelbke collection of Arabic and Persian manuscripts, which was assembled by the Swiss Orientalist Rudolf Gelbke, and which has ended up here at UCLA for reasons that are unknown to me. Okay, by my rough count, that yields a total of about 7,300 manuscripts. By comparison, Princeton University, which is #1, my alma mater, has just under 10,000 manuscripts. Yale has about 4,000, distant third. Sorry, Yale. Northwestern, 3,000, Library of Congress, 2,000, Harvard, 1,200, Michigan, 1,103. Thank you for that exact number, Evan. Columbia, roughly 600, although now I think there may be a few more than that, and so on down from there. So now a bit more in depth on the Minassian collection, which, as I said, would on its own be the second largest collection of Islamic manuscripts in North America. And then I'll say a word about the existing documentation, that is catalogs, hand lists, and so forth of the UCLA collections. And I should say before I launch into the Minassian that this, what I'm about to say, relies on the extensive exploratory work done by the late Professor Hossein Zia'i of the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. The Minassian collection consists of approximately 600 Persian manuscripts in disciplines other than medicine, 120 Persian manuscripts in medical subjects, 120 Arabic manuscripts, 2,000 Arabic manuscripts in other disciplines, 500 Turkish manuscripts, 5 Urdu manuscripts, and 1,000 Arabic and Persian collected volumes, or majamia, that is, volumes which consist of more than one literary work bound together. The bulk of these date from the 14th to the 17th century. 20 date to the 13th century, a handful date to the 12th, and maybe a couple actually to the 11th, and 150 of them to the 18th and 19th centuries. I should say they were assembled by a 20th century Armenian physician named Karo Minassian, who lived in the New Julfa section of Isfahan. And most of these manuscripts come via Isfahan. They were either copied in Isfahan or they were collected by the educated, wealthy middle and upper classes of Isfahan, and he purchased them sometime between 1935 and 1968 when UCLA acquired them under circumstances which, again, are unknown to me, but probably someone in this room knows more than I do about that subject. For some additional details, I would like to quote rather than just paraphrasing Professor Zia'i, and these have to do with the codicological characteristics of the manuscripts. All of them are written in black ink, some with headings in red ink, a considerable number with frontispiece illuminations, and about 12 with illustrations, some of museum quality, on handmade papers of various types, thicknesses, and sizes. Many of the manuscripts are in folio size with carefully hand-stitched regular 8 or 16 folio quires. You book people, I assume, are really getting excited about this, but I don't know exactly totally what I'm saying here. Many are in the half folio size, and some are in quarter folio size. The majority of the manuscripts are well preserved. A few show water damage, termite holes, and other types of damage. The collection also includes a large number of royal, governmental, and legal documents, chiefly from Safavid and Qajar Iran, letters, decrees, and contracts of different types that have not been studied at all. This is as of about a decade ago or a little less. This part of the collection may prove to be of unique importance for the study of the social, religious, and political history of Iran and Shiism, and to a lesser extent, the Middle East in general. End quote. The contents of the works in the collection are chiefly what one would expect, which is not at all to detract from their interest or importance. The main subjects include philosophy and theology, in which there are a great many works indeed, followed by law, logic, the exact sciences, astronomy, astrology, basically the curriculum of early modern Iranian madrasas, as well as quite a few adab works, works of literature. Professor Zia'i also noted that there are many volumes on the practical arts, quote, subjects such as archery, equestrian arts, cookbooks, manuals for teaching calligraphy, and so forth. So that is a brief overview of the Minassian collection. Now, the state of documentation and preservation of these. You've already probably been getting a sense from my remarks, but here's the rundown. Most of the information that I gave you regarding the 15 Islamic collections comes from the finding aids on the Online Archive of California. These can be accessed from this page on the UCLA library site. So there's somewhere in the UCLA library website, there's this guide, UCLA manuscript collections, digital collections, catalogs, finding aids, and so forth. And If you navigate your way here, down at the bottom, you'll find a number of finding aids, finding aid, finding aid, finding aid, finding aid. Almost all of the majority, maybe 11, 12 out of the 15 that I mentioned are accessible via links from this site. And when you click on those links, you get to something that looks like this in each case. And that's the OAC, the Online Archive of California site for each of those collections. You have the collection title, the collection number, and then I've circled the two places that I at least regard as most important or helpful on each of these sites. In the lower right, in many cases, you find the container list. Sometimes this gives you extraordinarily detailed information, sort of section by section guides to what's in different manuscripts, especially for some of the smaller collections. Sometimes it gives you more or less nothing, sort of like, you know, here is just like the numbers of manuscripts that are in each box, or not even that. If you click on it's not easy to see, but in the upper right, if you click on PDF, you can get sort of all the information for the given collection in one PDF, which is convenient. Okay, right, so for most of the larger collections, I should say this documentation is uneven at best and sometimes non-existent. Printed resources for the Islamic collections as a whole are the following. Most importantly, there's a 2-volume hand list compiled by the great Iranian bibliographer and scholar Mohammad Taqi Danish Pajou, who died in 1996, and Ismail Hakimi. This was written in Persian and published in Tehran in the early 1980s as Nuskhe-Khay Khati dar Kitabkhane Danishgahi Los Angeles. The level of detail that this work provides for individual manuscripts varies. For a given volume, one typically finds between 1 and 10 lines, usually closer to 1 than 10, giving some combination of title, it's organized by title, so title, author, script, date of copying, as well as some information on where the work appears in other catalogs, mostly in Persian. If a work is noteworthy for some reason and caught the eye of Danish Pajou, the authors will give a bit more information, all in Persian. It's in Persian, so if you don't read Persian, I'm sorry, it won't be very much help to you. This 2-volume hand list covers the majority, but not all, of the Islamic manuscript materials in the UCLA collections. Apart from Danish Pajou's important work, there are also English catalogs for many of the, if not all of the medical and scientific manuscripts, which today are managed not here at the Charles E. Young Research Library, but down the hill at the Louise M. Darling Biomedical Library. So if you're interested in those, you would see them in the Special Collections reading room there for the most part. Here are the 3 catalogs that I'm referring to, which were published in the late 70s and early 80s. First, Lutz Richter Bernburg in 1978 published a catalog of 132 Persian and 2 Arabic titles. This is an exceptionally comprehensive and detailed catalog, and important because it spans the entire classical period of Persian literary production between the 5th and the 13th centuries Hijri. For the Arabic medical manuscripts, Professor Nancy Gallagher, who's here with us this morning, produced a very helpful hand list of 112 such works in 1983. And then in 1984, Albert Zaki Iskandar produced a somewhat more detailed descriptive list of Arabic manuscripts on medicine and science. This is a conspectus of 203 important manuscripts, which he selected himself, as I understand, some of them dating back to the 11th century. I should say that this is an effort that this should be read along with Larry Conrad's very detailed and somewhat critical review of this catalog in the journal Medical History. But in any case, it's sort of the, as I understand, the reference work that's currently being used at the biomedical library to keep tabs on those manuscripts. The great bulk of these medical and scientific manuscripts have been microfilmed, and those microfilms are stored in various repositories here in California and elsewhere. You can even find digital copies of many of them, if not all of them, on archive.org, I discovered at random a few days ago. You will hear more about these materials later in the week from Professor Alex Roberts, who's with us from USC. So we see that the written documentation of the UCLA manuscript collections is everywhere uneven. Sometimes it's excellent. In other places, it's entirely lacking. The same may be said to a far greater degree of efforts to digitize images of the works in these collections. The only serious effort in this regard, in addition to the microfilms I just mentioned on archive.org, took place more than a decade ago. It focused on the Minassian collection, and I have not been able to discover much about the effort itself, which was funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, so I can only speak very briefly to the results. This produced a website that is still up. You can go there. There's a link from the UCLA, different UCLA pages that takes you to a page that looks like this. It contains a great deal of information of a kind about the Minassian collection, including extensive lists of titles, authors, and metadata. Some of it is ostensibly searchable, and there are also ostensibly digitized images of some of the manuscripts. Unfortunately, I've never been able to see any of them because they don't really load on browsers, any of the browsers that I've tried. But I invite you to explore this page, and maybe you'll be able to crack the code that I was unable to. On the whole, it must be said, I think, though, given the difficulty of using that site, that this effort at digitizing and making these manuscripts available seems to have faltered before it reached its goal. The web page, I didn't screenshot it, but at the bottom it says, copyright Regents of the University of California, 2009. And it's degraded quite a bit in the last decade, unfortunately. And much of the information it may once have contained is now somewhat disorganized, as I have said. So the site on the whole leaves a great deal to be desired, and I'm not aware of any other serious efforts to digitize or make available any of the manuscripts in the Islamic collections. Therefore, in an age when digital access to copiously described manuscripts in high-resolution images is becoming increasingly common and even expected, maybe, among library patrons, there is still much work to do in order to utilize and properly care for the UCLA Islamic manuscript collections in the 21st century. It is our hope that this workshop will equip and encourage the participating individuals and institutions to support that work. And as an example of the kinds of discoveries this might lead to, I opened with this slide and the image in the top, which is a little bit gory if you look very carefully at it. There's a man being devoured by a giant serpent of some kind. I gave my colleagues a choice of some of the other beautiful images, but they really preferred this gory one, so I went with it. In any case, it's from an early modern collection of the tales of Sinbad the Sailor, which many of you will be familiar with. And it's the image that graced the flyer for this workshop. And so when I sent out the flyer abroad, hither and thither, I was in contact with a scholar in Italy who is producing a critical edition of the Tales of Sinbad, which apparently has never been done. And she saw this and she immediately wrote to me astonished and said, "I've never heard of an illustrated manuscript of the Tales of Sinbad before." So even the one image that we chose at random for the flyer turned out to lead to a major discovery for a scholar working on this particular work. So we trust that more such discoveries are in store for those brave enough and intrepid enough to venture into the UCLA Islamic manuscript collections.